Good morning, good evening, hello. Thank you all so much for joining. And thanks, Lydia, for signing in so late at night from Hong Kong. Really appreciate you kicking us off this morning or this evening or this afternoon. So today we're going to talk about how to make the most of your performance review. And I love that poll. That was so interesting to see that half of you roughly look forward to this conversation every year, and the other half don't. So my hope today is that we can get everybody excited about this opportunity as a chance to really connect with your manager, look ahead to the future, set some really tangible and helpful goals, and really think about this conversation as an opportunity to propel your career forward. It's a chance to have a really meaty conversation all about you, which is not something we get to do every day. So as Lydia said, I've been managing teams for about 15 of my years at EF, and I have sat through my fair share of performance reviews, both on the receiving end and the giving end. And some have been better than others. That's the truth. And I think when I think about what separates the really excellent performance reviews from the not so excellent ones, it isn't actually that the feedback is more positive. It's not actually that the overall tone of the performance review is, 2 thumbs up, this is, great performance, keep it up. It's that both parties come to the table empowered to have a meaty conversation and feeling like they play an equal part in the outcome and the future. And that's what my hope is today, that everyone here can create that empowerment for themselves going into this conversation. So we're going to give some concrete tips today. And we're going to go through 5 of them together. The first is embrace a growth mindset. The second, prepare. 3, self-reflection. 4, be an active participant. And 5, follow through. And we'll go into each of these in some detail. So let's start with the first, embrace a growth mindset. Now, let's first acknowledge that there can be a bit of anxiety walking into a performance review. I think it was 38% of you said you're nervous about this. That's natural. Some people worry that, you'll hear some tough feedback from your manager. Maybe your manager isn't happy with your performance, and that can cause a little bit of anxiety worrying about that. For some of you, it just feels a little awkward having to sit and talk about yourself for so long. That's an uncomfortable position for some. And maybe for those of you who've never done a review or have not done one with this manager in particular, you just don't know what to expect. So there's a little bit of the fear of the unknown. So whatever it is, that's okay. It's normal. But our goal is to flip that today. And sorry, I'm jumping ahead. We're gonna work on flipping and taking the anxiety out of the process and to really focus on looking at the review as an opportunity for growth. So one thing to know is the worst thing that can happen to you in your performance review is not that you get tough feedback. That is not the worst thing. The worst thing is actually that you're told to just keep doing what you're doing. That's my performance review, 2 thumbs up, because the performance review is good when it stretches you and sets you up for a really successful future. I know that the name performance review suggests that it's all about the past, right? We're reviewing the past. I actually hate that word. Yes, you're going to reflect and review the past, but that's the springboard for the conversation about the future. And that's where the meat and the value of a performance review comes into play, about looking ahead and stretching, right? So as professionals, we want to grow. We want to grow our role. We want to grow ourselves and our skill set. We want to grow our impact on the organization. And we're not going to do that if the idea is just keep doing what you're doing, right? Let's look at the past. It was great. Keep doing that into the future. How boring would that be if that was the cadence of our career trajectory? We really want to be thinking about what happened in the past. How do we want to do it better, different, more for the future? So it's not your fault if you want to, if you're looking for the 2 thumbs up. I think it's sort of, almost ingrained, or dare I say brainwashed into us at a very early age, where we strive for those perfect scores. Certainly in the US, I think that's a real challenge we face. Everyone wants the A+, the perfect score. But hopefully you are getting enough praise from your manager throughout the year for the great work that you're doing when you deserve that praise. The performance review is about the future and what you want to do differently and more and next. So let's look at what we mean by a growth mindset. And let's first actually look at the opposite, the fixed mindset, which is the head on the right. Failure is the limit of my abilities. I'm either good at it or I'm not. I can either do it or I can't. My abilities are unchanging. I stick to what I know. When I'm frustrated, I give up. Feedback and criticism are personal. Ooh. You can see how if that is your mindset going into a review, it would be kind of scary, right? Because you're only striving for praise, and everything else is going to feel frustrating or, like it's limiting you. Now let's look on the left. Failure is an opportunity to grow. I can learn to do anything I want. Challenges will help me grow. Feedback is constructive. I am inspired by the success of others, and I like to try new things. So when people say mindset is everything, I really think that's true when it comes to performance reviews. Or if it's not everything, it's at least the foundation that you absolutely need to have when you walk into that conversation for it to be productive and successful. So let's say you work on this, and I recognize this is maybe easier said than done. There are some other resources out there about how you can practice this. Sometimes I think it's really helpful to reflect on some challenges you've had in your past that you've overcome and that you were stronger as a result of. Those are the types of examples that you can explore in your own experience to feel confident moving forward that you can get through anything, right? And that's sort of the growth mindset, is no matter what challenges you have, you can get through it. And here's some examples of times in my life that I've done that. And you can sort of reflect and meditate on those to encourage this growth mindset too. All right, so now we know we're not aiming for the perfect score. Feedback is constructive. We're looking at an opportunity to challenge ourselves and grow in different ways and stretch. So what comes next? We're going to prepare. Now, when you think about preparing for your own performance review, right? When you're in the chair of the recipient, you also want to think your manager is doing a fair amount of preparation for these reviews too. And you want to be an equal participant in that preparation so that you're both coming to the table ready to engage in a conversation, right? And your preparation is going to empower you to be an equal member of that conversation. So my advice here is to write the review for yourself. Your manager can tell you what format they'll be using. At EF, for those of you at EF, there is a template that's provided centrally, but not all managers or departments or functions use the exact same template. So definitely ask your manager, if you don't already know, if they haven't shared with you, what the format is going to be, because that allows you to then write the review in that format for yourself. And I really encourage you to actually type it out and take the time to do it as if you're the manager preparing to give this review for yourself. Now, outside of the actual template, there's a few questions that I think are really helpful to consider in your preparation. First is, what do you want to make sure your manager knows about this past year? This is an opportunity to have your manager's undivided attention, and again, to talk all about you. And if that makes you uncomfortable, I get it, but it's a really great opportunity. So what do you want to make sure your manager knows about this past year? Maybe it's something you're really proud of, which is that next bullet point. You certainly want to explore that, but maybe it's something you've struggled with, or you've been wondering about, or you're having a hard time with. You want to make sure you think about, what do you want to make sure gets talked about in that conversation, and make note of that. What are you most proud of? Again, make sure your manager knows the things that you did this past year that you're super proud of. They should know about those things, and they should remember them. And you want to make sure you're bringing those to the conversation so that you can bring those up. What are examples of the impact and progress you've made? And I want to talk about progress a little bit here specifically, because there can be a lot of progress from the beginning of one year to the end of one year. And reflecting on that progress can be really gratifying for you and empowering for you, because that doesn't have to end, right? That doesn't end at a year. It's a continuation into the next. So think about all the progress you made in one year. And now that really sets you up to think about what this next 6 months or a year could look like. And you'll want to share some of that with your manager too. And then what could have been better and how? This is your opportunity to give yourself some constructive feedback and really think about, maybe your results are awesome. Maybe if you're in sales, you crushed your goals and you're over goal and you're top of the leaderboard. Well, that's all good and well. But now I'm going to ask you to really dig. Even with that, what could have been better and how? And if you're not coming up with something, you got to keep digging and keep thinking about that, because we can all improve. Growth mindset. Think about expectations that you have for yourself. Do you know if they match your manager's expectations for you? This is important because expectations in your role can change from when you first step into that role to when you're a year or 2 or 3 years into the role. So if you don't know whether your expectations for yourself match your manager's, this is a great time to stop and pause and reflect on that and ask questions to your manager of, now that I'm this tenured in my position, what are you expecting of me? Here's what I've been thinking are, my expectations for myself. Do those align with you? So you want to do some thinking about that ahead of time. And then, of course, what are some tangible goals and ideas for how you want to grow your impact? Now, these should be short-term goals in the immediate future while you're in your role, and also thinking long-term beyond this role in your career path. What are some goals that you have? Now, if that question, that final bullet, sort of brings back that feeling of anxiety, it ratchets it up for you a little bit, that's okay. I know that sometimes we don't have clear answers to that question. What are my goals, my long-term goals? It's a high pressure question. And throughout our careers, we might move in and out of clarity around what that answer is, right? Sometimes we feel like we know exactly where we're headed, and I want this next job, and I want this, and I'm going to be a president one day. And then other times you might not feel so clear on what you're striving for and what your next steps might be. That's fine. But what you definitely want to do, if you don't have the answers to that, is take some time to do the work that helps have a productive conversation around that. And that gets into the third tip, which is self-reflection. So you might not know what your specific goals are, but you should do some self-reflection so that you know enough about yourself, your motivations, your strengths, so that you can engage in a brainstorm around your goals with your manager that you're an equal participant of. So there are a few sort of prompts for self-reflection that I'd like to offer you today. We won't spend the time to do the exercise, but I hope that you will as a little homework after this. So please jot these down. But the first reflection exercise is to think back on this past year and come up with a peak experience from the year, a peak professional experience. And what I mean by that is a professional moment where you felt like all your strengths were at play. You felt like you were firing on all cylinders. You felt confident and energized. You felt like you were sort of in your flow, in your groove. Like this was a peak experience, right? And I want you to take some time to reflect on that experience and think about why that felt so good. What were you doing? Who were you working with? What was the type of work that made you feel that way? So that's one prompt, peak experience. And I would take time to think about that. Maybe you can come up with more than one. Feel free to look back beyond this past year. Obviously, you know, the past year and a half for many of us has been a challenging year, given the pandemic and shifts in our lives to working from home. So if you need to look back a little bit further, that's okay too. But the point is to analyze an experience that you can dissect and understand the components of, right? Because our goal, of course, is to create more peak experiences in the future. Then there's some level of professional journaling that I think is a really good idea. And if you haven't done this before, you can start today. It doesn't have to be, you know, a constant thing. But the idea is to start to understand your ups and downs professionally. So similar to the peak experience, but a little bit more in the sort of day-to-day, I would like you to think about what separates your average day, a typical day, from a great day, right? A great day where you leave the office or shut your laptop and you have a little smile on your face or you have a little skip in your step because it was a good day and you felt fulfilled. And write down what you did that day. So the next time you feel that way, you feel kind of energized, you feel like you want to tell your spouse or your significant other or your mom or your roommate, you want to tell them about your day. Why? What was so great about that day? And then on the flip side, every time you leave the office or shut your computer and you feel depleted or a little drained, you want to take note of what was going on for me that day and why did I feel so down, right? Because then the goal is find those commonalities to help you understand what are your motivations. And most likely the days you feel great, you're utilizing your strengths and you're doing your best work. And the days you don't feel so good, probably the opposite. You're trying to pull from things that aren't your strengths. And we know that we do our best work when we're energized and when we're feeling on top of our game. So our goal is to identify the components of that so that you can bring those components to your conversation with your manager. So when you start to talk about goals, short-term and long-term, it's okay to say, you know what, I don't really know. But what I do know is I'm most energized when I'm collaborating with other people, or whether I have a project with really clear deliverables that I get to do some independent work on and then show you my work, right? Whatever those components are, you want to bring that, because then you can say, what are some opportunities for me to layer more of that into my day-to-day? And how do I anchor long-term goals around that type of activity? And your manager can hopefully give you some insight into that and have a productive brainstorm. Okay, so now review day. You've done the prep, you've done your self-reflection, you have your growth mindset, you're ready to hear it all. You're ready to tell it all. And now it's time to have the conversation. And tip number 4 is be an active participant. This is not a sit and get. This is not a listen and receive. This is you are an equal partner and you're there to, yes, listen, also share and discuss, collaborate about you and your goals and your future. So one component of the review and of being an active participant will certainly be receiving constructive feedback. And this is something that I think your manager will take some time to think through how to do in the best way possible for you. Most managers take time to think through that. And you want to think a little bit then about how you're going to receive it too. Because I will say, regardless of how strong your growth mindset is, it can be hard to hear negative or constructive feedback. But how you respond is important. It's important, for your manager, and it's important for your ability to sort of absorb it and take it. So I have a few tips around receiving constructive feedback. So one thing is, assume the best intentions from your manager and look at your manager as a partner in your development and growth. So this partner is bringing this feedback to your attention because they want to help you, right? So that's the first assumption you want to make. That allows you to, again, collaborate on this. And there are sort of two possibilities here. One is that this feedback is something you already know about yourself, right? And the other is that it's brand new information. So if you know it, my advice to you is to own it, right? To say, yes, I know that's something I've struggled with, rather than sort of explain around it or explain why it's hard for you or try and justify it, right? Which can come across as sort of closed off or defensive. You want to own it, and you want to share what you are doing to improve it, or what you want to do to improve it if you haven't started working on it yet. And if you don't know what you need to do to improve on that piece of feedback, you need to ask, right? So I promise you, your manager doesn't want to just hear you say, yes, okay, I'll work on that, I'll fix it, if you don't know how. If you don't know how to fix it, they want to hear you say, I know I'm struggling with that. I really want to do better. I've tried X, Y, and Z, and it's not working. I'm not sure what else to do. I could really use your advice on that, because that's going to then allow for a back and forth where your manager can really help you in fixing that and improving on that piece of feedback. Now, if it's new information, make sure you understand what the feedback really is. And I will say, if it's new information, you're likely going to feel, an emotional response to this. It always happens. So, take a beat. If you need to, it can be helpful to use a little filler like, interesting. Okay. To kind of just give yourself a moment to let that sink in. And then you can ask some questions and engage in the conversation. You want to just be careful that you don't come across as defensive in some of your questioning, right? A common question people have is, give me an example, right? But if you're just getting this feedback and you're like, give me an example, it could almost sound defensive, right? So you want to just take a minute. Okay, got it. Interesting. Do you have any examples for me, right? Take a minute to allow for that space. And you really need to make sure that you understand it and that it's actionable, so that you know what to do with it. So that's your manager's responsibility too. When they're thinking about how to give you the feedback, they're thinking about, how do I make this actionable? And you also want to hold them accountable to that. Is this actionable feedback? What do I do with it? What does improvement in this area actually look like? And those are some questions you can ask. So then that brings us to our final tip, follow through. And I think this goes without saying, but you don't want to just file away this performance review and wait till the next one before you follow up again. My suggestion is to take the time to write a follow-up email to your manager, both thanking them for their time and their feedback, which always, I think, feels really good to the manager, but also share what you found to be the most important takeaways that you're excited to work on. So thank you so much for the conversation today. I'm really looking forward to working on X, Y, and Z, and I hear loud and clear that your priorities for me are A, B, and C, and I look forward to working on this, right? And that does a couple things. It's nice for your manager, but it's also good for you. You might have just talked for an hour and a half. You're going to cover a lot of content. This is a chance for you to sort of synthesize that content for yourself and put it in bite-sized pieces, 3 things you're going to focus on right away. The other part of follow through is setting a little bit of a deadline for yourself for each of those aspects that you want to work on. So if one of your aspects is, if one of your takeaways is that you want to take on more leadership on the team and run some trainings over the coming months, why don't you set in your calendar, when do you want to be running those trainings and having an opportunity to sort of check in and follow up. Did I do those things? If there's an area of your performance that needs work, set a deadline to follow up with your manager. Even better, send an invite to your manager for 6 weeks from today saying, hey, I'm really thinking about that feedback you gave me. Can we check in on this day and see how you're doing, how I'm doing on that feedback? And that holds you both accountable. And it also, if it's something you're really working on and improving on, it ensures that your manager is going to see your improvement. I once gave a staff member some really tough feedback that was really hard for them to hear. And they did this for me. They set something in our calendar and he said, I really am determined to work on this. I want to check in every month on this. I'm going to put this on our calendar and I want to check in. And every month in that meeting, he said, here's what I've been working on. Do you see it? And it was a really great way for me to see his commitment to the improvement and see that, in fact, he was making the improvement. And it was really helpful for both of us. So those are some ways to take the feedback and make it really actionable. And we're going to wrap up here. I hope that these tips were helpful in thinking about how to prepare and make the most of your review. This is a conversation that, it sounds like, was it 47, 48% of you look forward to every year, which I think is fantastic. I look forward to performance review season so much. I hope that the rest of you, we can get on that type of cycle where you are also really looking forward to this opportunity to dive in, to explore your previous year with the intention of mapping out a really productive future year and future career. And, I encourage you all to take the time so that you can walk into that conversation feeling empowered and ready to do just that. So thank you all so much. Thanks for spending the time and have a wonderful rest of your morning, afternoon, evening.